Hi everyone. If we haven't already met, I'm Steve Schauder. I'm the Executive Director for Jewish Family Service of Greater Harrisburg. I've been given the honor of introducing Rebecca Kirzner to the group. Earlier today, I was one of 1,000 participants for a group that Rebecca was moderating. I'm not sure if Jen was on it or if anyone else was on the call, where HIAS gave an update on Ukrainian immigration. So I think she managed that so effectively. I think this group, I think this group she'll do well with. But I'm really thrilled to be the one doing the introduction, because we're really honored to be a partner of HIAS in resettlement. In this December, after a 40-year gap, JFS took on resettlement work again to help resettle Afghan refugees. To date, we've resettled 42 refugees, and we have more on the way. So we're really excited about that. And we're maybe at the end of this, I could talk. I asked Jen for a minute or two just to talk a little bit more about the project, but and maybe at the end of this, we could talk about our community's role in immigration moving forward as a Jewish community. I want to, start the program. Rebecca is the Senior Director of Grassroots Advocacy and Organizing for HIAS. As many of us know, HIAS was founded more than 130 years ago to focus on Jewish refugees and immigration and welcoming them to the country, but they've evolved a long time ago to basically work with refugees all over the world. Rebecca is the Senior Director of Grassroots Advocacy and Organizing at HIAS, where she really focuses on grassroots advocacy and activism around refugees and for refugees. Prior to joining HIAS, Rebecca was the Mid-Atlantic Regional Director at J Street, and she's a former teacher in the School District of Philadelphia and holds a master's degree from the University of Pennsylvania. I'm assuming we have some other UPenn grads here, but anyway, Rebecca, we turn things over to you.
Firstly, I want to thank you for that incredibly generous introduction. HIAS is so grateful for the partnership of JFS and Harrisburg. And I'm honored that you were on our call earlier today. So you already know everything I'm going to say. So, so I think it's good that there's a few people that weren't on it. So at least I'll have something to be able to talk about. And it's also just lovely to see your faces. I definitely recognize a few people from when I came out to Harrisburg. I guess it was like maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, and organized by Mariel, who I see is on the call. So it is good to see you all again. So I also just want to say that I can remember, back in 2016, I know, Stephen, you didn't mention 2016, when the Harrisburg community really mobilized around welcoming Syrian refugees. And it was a major community mobilization. And it's something that really stuck with me as being an incredible full community response. And it's part of why Harrisburg has been on our list for years in terms of a community that we were hoping to re-engage in resettlement. And to now have you as part of the HIAS affiliate network resettling Afghans is just an incredible full circle. And the work that you've done to mobilize so quickly in response to this Afghan moment is just, it's profound. So we thank you for that. And of course, you are, one of many Jewish communities around the world and in this country who've made it a priority to lift up the importance of welcoming and protecting the rights and safety of refugees. And I should say that for Jews, standing with refugees is an act of recognition, a real recognition for us of the commonalities with our own stories, honoring our history and our present, upholding our values. It is an act of welcome, sometimes of courage, and always of love. And for me in particular, it honors my namesake, my grandma Becky, who arrived in the 1920s through Ellis Island. It honors my grandpa, who arrived from Cuba 20 years after that, my wife's Holocaust survivor family, and so many HIAS clients that I've met from around the world who have moved from one country to another in an act of bravery, resilience, and dignity. And so I want to just thank you all for being part of that, even by virtue of coming to this program. I am here representing HIAS, and I'm so proud to be here doing that. We're an international Jewish refugee agency. For those of you who don't know us, we are the oldest refugee agency in the world. And so me being here today, I represent, I'm just one of 1,800 staff members of HIAS in almost 100 offices in 16 countries providing aid to refugees. And I am proud to be associated with HIAS's historic work, helping generations of Jews come to the United States. We estimate, whether they know it or not, that we supported the families of nearly half of the American Jewish community to immigrate to this country in some way throughout many waves of Jewish immigration. And yet I am prouder still to be associated with our current work serving refugees around the world, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, or nationality, which is very much based in our Jewish values. To give some examples, we are on the Greek island of Lesbos, serving refugees crossing the Mediterranean. We are in cities all along the US-Mexico border on both the US and Mexico sides. We're in 13 refugee camps in Chad, serving survivors of the Darfur genocide, in 9 countries in Latin America, serving people displaced from Venezuela and the Northern Triangle. So those are just a few examples. And what we like to say is that once our organization helped refugees because the refugees are Jewish, and now we do it because we are Jewish. So I was given a little direction for tonight, and I was asked to speak about a few topics, specifically Afghan refugees and Ukrainian refugees. But I want to frame it within a broader context as well, because those two crises alone encompass millions of people. They're humanitarian crises of enormous proportions, but they are also the two crises that are most in the news. And because of the attention in the news, everyone here, understands that Afghanistan, that Ukraine are unsafe. Of course, people had to leave those places. Of course, they have to cross into another country to escape that danger. That is obvious, but it should be that obvious for every refugee population, for any population living under an oppressive regime. Syrians, Eritreans, for any people living in a highly dangerous country, Hondurans, Haitians, for anyone actively persecuted for their ethnicity, Rohingya, Uyghurs, for people that look like me, for people who don't look like me, for people crossing borders far away from us, for people crossing our own US-Mexico border. We are all equally human, and it is a human right to seek safety. I know that no one knows that more than this community, which has stood up for Syrians, for Afghans, for Ukrainians, but I wanted to say it anyway, because opening our hearts is part of what makes us human too. And being Jewish is about seeing every human as being infinitely holy. So I wanted to say that because I think that where we are is in a moment where certain groups of people have been treated differently than other groups of people in terms of their access to basic refugee protections. And that's something that I want to continue, a point that I want to continue to return to. So I'll give a little context about Afghan refugees and the work that you've been doing, although I feel like because of the work that you've been doing as part of JFS, that it might be something that you know most about, which is that last August, the US withdrew from Afghanistan, withdrew our military presence, leaving a great number of people in extreme danger, particularly people who worked with the US military or were in some way connected to the US government, but others as well who were likely to be persecuted by the Taliban for their participation with the US military or because of their, who they were, because they're educated women, for example, or, people who kind of didn't fit with the values of the Taliban. So in August, in a very rushed and kind of chaotic effort, there were many plane loads of people who were evacuated to the United States. The US government evacuated 76,000 Afghans directly to the United States. And brought them straight to what we called safe havens or military bases in the United States. It took 6 months for the resettlement networks of the 9 refugee resettlement agencies, which includes JFS, which is part of HIAS's network, to resettle those 76,000 people. And now I guess it's more than 6 months later, it's about 8 months later, every single one of the people who was brought to those bases initially has been resettled into communities, including, I would assume, the 42 people that you spoke about, Stephen. And so they have all been resettled into communities, which was a huge effort from the resettlement community and something that took a lot from our network. In addition, at this point, there are now people coming in who were not brought straight to the United States, who were brought to lily pads, which were military bases, US military bases in other countries, and then who are now coming in a much slower pace to the United States. So we're still very much in this Afghan resettlement moment. But what has not happened is providing pathways for people who are still trapped in Afghanistan. People who were able to leave at that point in August, they are slowly making their way here, but there is still a large number of people who are in danger without really any viable pathways to come to the United States. The United States has set out humanitarian parole as being an option for people, but is not processing those applications. And there needs to be much more to be done to bring them to the United States. There's also much that needs to be done to support the Afghans who were brought here. Most significantly is the local community support that you're providing. And there's also a legal support that needs to be provided, because a huge percentage of the people who came, the 76,000, are here on a temporary status. And their status needs to be adjusted to a permanent status so they're able to stay here for the long term. And that's something that HIAS has been petitioning Congress to do for months now, to pass an Afghan Adjustment Act. So that's where we are in Afghanistan. Where we are on Ukraine is this. So firstly, HIAS has helped refugees from Ukraine, Jewish and not, for over 100 years, and in the past few months has really mobilized in response to yet another refugee crisis, which is, at this point, I just looked up the numbers before I joined this call, more than 5 million people have fled Ukraine, and on top of that, another 7 million people internally displaced within Ukraine, and it's the largest forced displacement crisis in Europe, at least since World War II. The humanitarian needs are increasing exponentially, both in Ukraine and outside of it. And HIAS basically has a 4-pronged approach in our response to this crisis. First of all, we are in Ukraine with our partnership with Right to Protection, is a local Ukrainian NGO, which used to be called HIAS Ukraine. And we are working with displaced populations within Ukraine through Right to Protect, R2P. Also, we are setting up outside of Ukraine in Poland to help people who have crossed into Poland and need support there. We're also working to mobilize the Jewish communities of Europe to be able to provide the types of community support that we've been working with the US Jewish communities to do for a long time. And then lastly, we are preparing to welcome Ukrainians to the United States. And, Stephen, in your introduction, you said that we had a call today. The reason why is because there is a new program to welcome Ukrainians to the United States that is basically 3 hours old. It was launched during the call that we were both on. And this is a program where individuals in the United States, the Biden administration just announced this, that individuals in the United States can petition to bring Ukrainians to the United States for a temporary stay of 2 years. And how that would work is, you would simply fill out a form to say that you can financially sponsor someone and bring them to the United States in that way. Now, this sounds great, and we had been asking the US government to provide pathways for people to be able to be reunited with their family from Ukraine, but there's a few problems with it. And one of them is the temporary nature of it. I think that the US government's assumption that people will only want to be here temporarily for 2 years is probably faulty. I think that there's probably a lot of people who want to be here longer, and they have not set out a pathway for people to be able to stay. That's number one. Number two is that they're not eligible for refugee resettlement services like those provided by JFS. So they, it's going to be entirely on community individuals to support it. That's number two. Another problem is that they did not use the US refugee resettlement program to do this. So if they had done that, then they would have permanent status and they would have the support of refugee agencies, but they're kind of running around the refugee program to do this, creating an exception for, for Ukrainians, and not just any Ukrainians with connections who have the financial ability to sponsor them, which is not an equitable program. It's an exception that's being created for this population. And that's something that's deeply troubling, because there's many thousands of Americans who have family and connections who are in danger in another country who are not able to do something like this. So that's, there's questions that we have and challenges to this approach, which will both be able to reunite families and presents real qualms for us. So we do not know quite how everything is going to shake out in the next week or so. It was just launched, and we know there's a huge amount of interest in it. There's a huge amount of interest from the Jewish community in helping Ukrainians to come to this country, which is wonderful, and we appreciate it. And we're going to have to sort out exactly how that will look with this private sponsorship model, but we know that the Jewish community will be able to be quite helpful in bringing people here. So I guess lastly, I would be really remiss if I didn't mention, that we're not just talking about Ukraine and Afghanistan right now. This past year, the Biden administration committed to welcoming 125,000 refugees from around the world. We did a wonderful job, I think, with helping particular populations of people. But in terms of that number of people welcomed through the refugee program, pulling out the Afghans, only about 8,000 people were brought here from anywhere else in the world. So that's an area where we're really pushing for there to be improvement and for them to rebuild the refugee program, which was so damaged under the historic lows that it sunk to during the Trump administration. And then after the Trump administration, the COVID crisis, which both very much damaged the refugee program. And then on top of that, there is the US-Mexico border, where two policies have basically restricted asylum completely. Right now, if someone were to approach the US-Mexico border and say, I am in danger, I'm fleeing for my life. And this is not that different from someone fleeing from Ukraine to Poland. Someone comes to the border and says, I am in danger, I'm fleeing for my life. Right now, most of those people are being restricted from entering and being turned away and told, sorry, you cannot come in. And the two policies that are contributing to that are called Remain in Mexico and Title 42. Title 42 is a coronavirus, it's a COVID era restriction that basically says that because of the threat of COVID, borders closed to asylum seekers. Now, I don't know, but we, here our masking requirements were just removed, with the vaccines, with testing, with masking. It shouldn't be the case that because someone maybe has COVID, which, we could test for that now, that we are denying safety to everyone at the US-Mexico border, but that's what's happening. And we're turning people back knowingly, with tens of thousands of cases of people who, after they were turned back, were raped, were extorted, were kidnapped, were assaulted, were murdered. We know that for a fact, and yet we're doing that over and over again, more than 1.7 million times since the start of the Biden administration. And then the second policy is Remain in Mexico, which does a similar thing. It turns people back into Mexico.
I think we just lost Rebecca. Hopefully she'll sign back on. What I'll do just to save time until she gets back is I'll read, we're going to be, I put in the chat the explanation of what we're going to do in the groups. We have moderators for each room. It's going to be myself, though I'll be in a few moments late because I have to get people into breakout rooms. Rabbi Kaptauber, Alex Halper, Jana Match, Bill Walter, and Stephen Schauder. There is timing that the moderators will help you through for the different questions. I put the link to the questions, but if you don't have them, the moderators can read them as well. And as we all talk together, the important thing is to follow the conversation agreements. Living Room Conversation is a national program that creates dialogue opportunities for people with different perspectives. And they give a lot of nice options like this way to preface the conversation, which starts with be curious and listen to understand. The conversation is as much about listening as it is about talking. You might enjoy exploring how others' experiences have shaped their values and perspectives. You'll want to show respect and suspend judgment because people tend to judge one another. Setting judgment aside opens you up to learning from others and make them feel respected and appreciated. Try to truly listen without interruption or crosstalk. Note any common ground as well as any differences. Look for areas of agreement or shared values that may arise and take an interest in the differing beliefs and opinions of others. Be authentic and welcome that from others. Share what's important to you, speak from your experience, be considerate of others who are doing the same. Be purposeful and to the point. Do your best to keep your comments concise. Oops, here she is. Lying her back. And relevant to the question you're answering, be conscious of sharing airtime with other participants. And the final one, own and guide the conversation. Take responsibility for the quality of your participation and conversation as a whole. Be proactive in getting yourself and others back on track if needed. Use an agreed upon signal like the timeout sign if you feel agreements are not being honored. Rebecca, welcome back. I hope I didn't do anything to knock you off.
I have no explanation. I am so sorry. Wow. One day in person, right? One day we'll be in person and we won't have these tech issues. May that day come soon. Jen, did you want me to continue or?
Yeah, you can talk for another couple minutes. I just chimed in with the instructions to save time till you got back on.
Oh, okay. I appreciate that. Everyone, I am so sorry. I don't even know what happened. I really apologize. I think, where I was just in explaining that there's these two policies, Title 42 and Remain in Mexico, that are working together to prevent asylum at the border. And asylum is a very basic right. It's just the ability to say, I am fleeing for my life. I need a chance to make my case, and to be able to have that case adjudicated fairly. And right now, instead of that, we're just simply turning asylum seekers back into danger. It is legal to seek asylum. It is legal to seek asylum whether you're at a port of entry, whether you're between ports of entry. But what's happening is that for people who are approaching a port of entry, who are doing it the right way, quote unquote, right? The right way. Those are the people who are being turned away and just being told, forget it. You have no chance of coming in. There's no safety for you here. And so it's putting people in the precarious situation of needing to come in between ports of entry and needing to take these difficult and dangerous journeys in order, sacrificing their own safety and their own lives in order to make, to have a chance at a better future for their kids and their family. And so it is a really desperate situation. Tomorrow morning, the Supreme Court will hear the Remain in Mexico case to figure out if, if it will remain in place and if the Biden administration needs to keep that in place. And then Title 42, the Biden administration said that they would rescind it and that it would be over by May 23rd. But that's now being fought in the courts too. There's a very significant right-wing element that fights back whenever there's something going on the US-Mexico border with all kinds of misinformation about who is coming and why. And so I really do think that right now we need to be paying attention to that and paying attention to our willingness to welcome people from certain places, but not from others, especially on our very own doorsteps where we are, very, very noticeably turning people away. So I apologize for that interlude there, but I just want to, end by saying that I appreciate you all so much, and JFS of Greater Harrisburg and what you've all been doing. I'd be happy to take any questions, and and again, thank you for the opportunity to be with you tonight.
Does anyone have any questions for Rebecca? If not, I'm going to open the breakout rooms right now.
Can I, before we do, can I ask Rebecca to clarify that, Rebecca, I know that the community sponsor model was discussed today. Maybe can you share that because I do think people are going to be asked about Ukraine specifically. It's a pretty unique model. So maybe if you could share for 1 minute some of the details around that.
Yeah. I wish I had a lot of details, but this is what the Biden administration has launched. They have said that if you have a particular individual that you want to sponsor to bring to the United States, then you fill out a form called the I-134, which is basically demonstrates your ability to welcome someone financially, to kind of fiscally sponsor them, that you actually have to provide, bank account information that you have enough to be able to, support someone else in the country. And then they will process that, and then they will allow you to kind of bring someone in who will be screened and vetted before they come in, and they will be given 2 years of humanitarian parole. Which is a temporary thing. I mean, usually humanitarian parole is used, for example, for someone who needs like urgent surgery in the United States, and it's just a way to bring someone in on a temporary basis. It's not even an immigration status. So they're intending for people to use this for short-term stays, and basically anyone would be able to do that. What we're imagining could also happen is that there may be communities or groups of people who are interested in sponsoring Ukrainians, but they don't have a particular individual in mind. And so for that, we're going to probably set up some kind of matching system of, Ukrainians being able to apply in, and then, matching them to people who can help to sponsor. We'll need to do something along those lines. Another way is, of course, to be in contact with local Ukrainian organizations who may actually have the names of specific people, family members that need to come to the United States and who need those financial sponsors. Now, I don't want to speak out of turn here, because this program is now, it's 3.5 hours old, and HIAS has not had a conversation with JFS about, how we'll work with JFS around this structure. But what I will say is that working to support Ukrainians coming to the United States is not unlike, working to support any other refugee population, and that, the needs for the community to come together and to support and to provide housing and, and volunteer support and financial support will probably all be there as well for this population. And so it is, yet another moment to think about how the community can come together, and whether congregations want to do this in some way, or whether, groups of people want to do this in some way, because it is a moment to really be able to help a lot of people. The Biden administration says they'll welcome 100,000 people through this pathway.
Thank you.
Becca, there's two other questions. But I'm going to start with one and maybe we can have time at the end for the other. Rabbi Muroff asked how you respond to people, including members of our Jewish community, who have reservations about immigration. How do you think we can dialogue constructively on the issue, which is often so polarizing? That'll frame what we're about to say. I'm going to ask you hold it to 2 minutes so we can have time for dialogue.
I think it comes down to using personal stories and personal narratives. I agree that the political dialogue has become very polarizing. So I think it comes down to being able to talk about this as in terms of human beings, individual stories, and trying to break down some of those barriers. There's my quick answer, Jen.
Sure. And what I'll ask is, as I open the rooms, Rebecca, if you can go to room 1, because Rabbi Kaptaber has her hand up and perhaps you can help with that. I'm going to send everybody out. The instructions are in the chat and I will move people to rooms who got on late. So everyone will get to a room. Give everyone a moment to return. And when we do, we have a question already prepped for Rebecca that came out of the session I was in, and then we can hear from the other groups as well. So Robin, I think it is safe for you to go ahead and ask the question.
So Rebecca, just what we can do in Harrisburg now. So we talked about things like, I think on a larger level, but how we can really relate it now to Harrisburg and what we can do to make an even greater impact. And I know we're already doing a really wonderful job, but just how do we continue that impact and make a greater impact, or even make like systemic change in order to make the process easier?
Yeah, I think that I should start this question, and then maybe Stephen wants to chime in about local engagement as well. But I think that welcoming people to your community it is truly at the base level a local effort, and it is a community effort, and it is a way of, it's about welcoming neighbors. And so what you've all been doing in terms of welcoming the Afghan newcomers is just, it's just remarkable and it's wonderful. And I hope that I hope you continue to do it. And, I hope that, as the newcomers trickle in, whether they're from Afghanistan, whether they're from another country, the community will be able to continue to provide that warm welcome, which usually consists of, volunteer hours. It might consist of, raising some money from within the community to support, but, really creating and making sure that there is a welcoming environment, that there are English language classes, that there are, the community is educated about, who immigrants are and how to welcome, them and what the needs are. That maybe there's ways that you could do outreach to the, to the hospitals or to landlords who have, apartments to rent, or to schools, to kind of, do that type of education. Bigger picture, I think that what we all need to do is to, advocate for policies that are fair. I think that it was in one of the breakout rooms, we were talking about how the fact that the immigration system is just a mess right now. It is incomprehensible, it is confusing, and it is profoundly unjust. The people who are being, there are people who are fleeing for their lives who basically have no pathway. There's no front door. People always say, you should come in through the front door to the United States. People should come in the right way. That doesn't exist right now. There is no front door. There's no right way. And I believe that we're a country, we're big enough, we're smart enough that we could have a process that is fair, that treats people fairly, and that isn't cruel. Why does it need to include ripping away people's children at the border? Why does it need to include, turning people away without giving them a hearing and sending them back into, to be able to make their way through coyotes through a desert? I think that we can have a system that is fair and bureaucratic and even boring at the border and really throughout. So I think that if this community is willing to be part of that advocacy, I'm in Philly, we've got a very important election coming up. I think that we can be asking that of candidates to not have such a polarized, all or nothing kind of conversation, but to have a conversation about how we improve this system, not kind of a, keep them all out, let them all in kind of conversation, because no one actually thinks that we should keep them all out or let them all in. We need kind of a nuanced approach that is fair. And I think that we can all be advocating for that, especially through this next election season.
Thanks, Rebecca. So Stephen, if you can respond, and then Alex Halper had his hand up, so I'll call on him first after you.
Well, I think I wanted to do a shameless pitch based on Rebecca's point right now, which is I know that everyone on this call is kind-hearted and decent and really interested in the immigration issue. And I will say that defining the greatest challenge we have in immigration is housing. So we do have a family of 8 that just arrived, and they need a 5-bedroom house and ideally 2 bathrooms. There are some older family members. We can find 5-bedroom houses with 1 bathroom. In this family situation, it's really not a good fit. So if you know of any housing, please let us know. And we're starting to get multiple 2 adults arriving. So we need multiple 2-bedroom apartments. So if you know of anybody, and those can also be easier, but housing is everything. The idea that there are some communities where someone's been resettled and they're in a hotel for 6 months, and we've been really, really good. I don't think anyone's been in a hotel longer than 3 weeks tops. We've really been very good at finding housing for people arriving, but everything is built on housing. And if we could just get your help around that, it would be so appreciated. If you know a landlord, a sympathetic landlord, we will follow up right away. So thank you so much. That was my pitch. So I'm turning things back to Jen.
Thanks, Stephen. And if other people other than Alex want to bring things back from the group, either use the raise hand feature or just message me and I'll call on you next. But Alex, please go.
Thanks, Jen. I don't know if we had a really interesting conversation in our group, but I had a question for Rebecca, just with the theme of the living room conversations and Kulanu, and wondering if, Rebecca, if you've had experiences with dialoguing with sort of your counterparts on the other side of the advocacy spectrum, and if you have experiences you can share of positive construction discussions with individuals with whom you might disagree strongly, but were able to make progress, and maybe what that progress looked like.
I can't remember if I talked about this in the group that you were in, Alex. I don't remember. I was bouncing between the different groups. I haven't done it in a debate format. I don't know if that was the question. I haven't done it kind of publicly, but privately in one-on-one conversations, because I think that's where you make progress, is conversations like this, small groups, one-on-one. I think it's about actually hearing each other, actually asking questions and getting curious about where people's positions come from, what they are, people's views come from somewhere, right? Is it a fear? Is it a story? Is it something that, they've heard? Is it, and just kind of, getting curious about what, where each other are coming from and what your story is, and kind of connecting on an actual person to person level, where instead of just shouting facts, facts don't change minds. Like, it's actually about learning about each other's stories and learning about, what brings, why we've both entered this conversation and why we're both in the room, and where we're coming from. And I don't think that I've, ever had an experience where I've completely, over the course of one conversation, changed someone into an immigration advocate, but we've gotten a lot closer to understanding where each other are coming from. And that's a big deal, because I think that in this very polarized political environment, where people are just kind of, screaming facts back and forth at each other, and, that's not a dialogue, and that doesn't actually move anyone. So I think it's the sharing stories, and it's, getting to the root of what, finding out where you have something in common and going from that.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm going to call on Phil in a second, but I just want to add to that. So we had started this Kulanu series. Well, we had a speaker, and then we did a 2-part series with resetting the table. And I think you nailed it on the head. Like debating, you have, like, you're going into it, someone wants to be a winner on each side. But if you're having these one-on-one conversations and getting to know people as people and don't have all that, stuff going on, then you can have these, and the curiosity is something that's come up in a lot of the sessions I've handled. But Phil, what did you want to ask or add?
I think the confusing thing for me is that, we're talking about listening to other people's views and understanding. I find the Jewish community to be the most polarizing community there is. And it is what it is. It is 90% Democrat, 90% liberal. And me as a conservative Republican, it's very hard to have constructive conversations, even within my own Jewish community. And I wish we could start here in the Jewish community just to be a little bit more open to other people's views. I don't think anybody's anti-immigration. If they are, there's something wrong. It's just how we approach it and where the limits are and how we do it the right for the people trying to come here and for the United States of America and our citizens. So I think it starts within the Jewish community and listen to what some of your other constituents might be saying, because there's good views on both sides. I learned a lot from our listening to other folks. So I think we have to start with ourselves and be a little bit more open to opposing views.
Phil, I appreciate you being frank, and I'm going to task you and others. One of the biggest challenges we've had so far is getting more conservative perspectives to the table. It's something we certainly want to have, and the goal is to make it less polarizing. But I can tell you, in my role, it is definitely not a 90-10. I'd say it's probably like maybe 30-70 based on the feedback I get from things we share. But in this type of conversation, I think we're attracting a lot of like-minded people, but you and I will work with next session to get more people. Who else? Anyone else want to bring any thoughts back? Well, if not, I just want to thank all of you for taking time out on a Monday evening. I really enjoyed being in my room, and I hope you all enjoyed being in your room. I want to thank Rebecca again for not only giving us that helpful introduction, but for sticking with us and adding some information to each of our sessions. I want to thank Steve again for recruiting Rebecca and really encouraging us to do this. And I want to thank the other members of Kulanu who are on the, oh wait, Jerry has, is that a clap or a call, a question? Oh, it's a clap. Okay, good stuff. I want to thank, I want to thank Rabbi Kaptaber, Rabbi Muroff, Jana Match, I'm trying to see from Steve Schauder, Jill Hennig, and I think I've got everybody from our Kulanu group, but it's been a really rewarding discussion. Alex has been kind of a committee member on the side, so thank you, Alex, especially with the living room conversation. But we'd love to hear you in future dialogues as well. And if there's specific topics, if you look through the living room conversations, there's like 100 topics. So we'd love to hear from you on other topics that we can do next. So I hope everyone has a wonderful week and a wonderful evening. So take care and thank everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.